Okay, everybody getting in and getting situated. Now it's quiet. We appreciate everyone's attendance here for the class this morning. I say this pretty much every week. If you are at home watching this, that we also appreciate your interest there in the things that are being studied, and we hope to see you here with us there in the auditorium. And as always, these things that we're studying in this book of Ecclesiastes, particularly these first 7 verses of chapter 5, these are things that I take very seriously. I think they are things that are really important there to us. I mean, from the time of the preacher, there is an essential part of our makeup there, and ultimately will dictate there where we spend eternity. Before we begin, let's pause for a word of prayer. Our Father in heaven, we're so thankful that you have blessed us with this beautiful day, that we're here to have the privilege of gathering together. We were in verses 4 and 5 of this 5th chapter, and I'm sorry, I don't have books there. For the most part, they're just following along there with the PowerPoint slides. You will get pretty much everything that is included in the book. Then, like John found a copy, he's headed somewhere with it there, so we'll see. Okay, good. We had talked about these things at the close of class last week. Verses 4 and 5. Again, when you make a vow to God, do not be late in paying, for he takes no delight in fools. Pay what you vow. It is better that you not vow than vow and not pay. And we looked at some Old Testament examples of people that had made vows before God and they had kept them. We looked at Jonah there. We looked at Hannah, the mother there of the prophet Samuel. And at the close of class, we were talking about Jephthah and the vow he made to the Lord. Then a rash vow, a foolish vow. Yeah. I mean, it was when you consider the vow that he made. You know, if you will give me victory over the Ammonites, then the first things that comes out my door when I get home, then I will offer it as a burnt sacrifice to you. And of course, the first thing there that he saw, or the first person, was his own daughter, there as she came out to meet him. And he told us, you've caused me great sorrow there in this because of the vow I've made. And she said to him, you've made this vow, that you have to keep the vow you made to the Lord. Now, it's argued, it's discussed, whether he actually offered her as a burnt offering. I would submit to you that no, he did not burn his own daughter. That vow was fulfilled there in another wife dedicated there to the Lord. Okay. Questions, comments before we continue here? Okay. If you look down at the very bottom there of the screen here, I added that sentence, you promised to be faithful to God. Now, prior to that, we talked about these worldly promises that we make. Whether it's to pay your bills, whether it's to spend more time with your children, whether it is to be faithful there to your spouse. Now we get down there to the crux of the matter here. There, promises that you make to God, vows that you make there before the Lord. You promise to be faithful to God, but, and we can fill in those blanks right there. Let's look at some New Testament references here there that can give us a clue to the danger of promising to be faithful to God. And let's not make any mistakes about this. When you make that decision in your life that to submit yourself to God, then when you confess your belief in Him, when you confess that belief that He is the Son of God, when you repent of those sins, when you are immersed in water for remission of those sins, you are making a promise to God that you come up out of that water, you have committed your life to the Lord. So let's look at this, the words of Jesus in Luke, there, chapter 9, verses 61 and 62. And another also said, Lord, I will follow you, but let me first go and bid them farewell who are at my house. But Jesus said to him, no one, having put his hand to the plow and looking back, is fit for the kingdom of God. Now, again, consider verse 5 of Ecclesiastes 5. It is better that you do not vow than to vow and not pay. That's the message here of Jesus' words. Dick?
Going back to what you said earlier, good point. Jephthah blamed his daughter. You caused me great sorrow.
Mm-hmm.
No, the sorrow was caused by his rash vow,
Yes.
not by what she did. What was he expecting to come out of the door? Calf.
Yeah.
Normally, you would expect a person to come out the door. It's the rash vow that she never made.
It was a rash. You know what, and I'm not going to move back to Jephthah too far here. The Lord kept his end of that vow, did he not? That when Jephthah said, if you give me victory over the Ammonites, then I will. He got the victory there over the Ammonites. Probably would have gotten it anyway, without the vow there. But again, we won't move too far into that. Again, keep in mind those words that are circled there. It's better not to vow than to vow and not pay. Look also, consider this proverb there. Proverbs 26, verse 11, as a dog returns to his own vomit, so the fool repeats his folly. Now, Peter made good use of that proverb of Solomon's in 2 Peter chapter 2, verses 21, 22. Take a look at that. For it would have been better for them not to have known the way of righteousness than having known it to turn from the holy commandment delivered to them. But it has happened, according to the true proverb, the dog is turned to his own vomit again, and the sow that was washed to her wallowing in the mire. Again, Peter emphasizing this. They're quoting Solomon, that you make this promise to God and you turn back from it, you're that same person that the preacher warned about there in the book of Proverbs. You have returned to your own vomit, the hog wallowing in the mire. Not a proverb I can find in the Old Testament there, but it was something that Peter was familiar with there and used right here. He goes on in verse 6 that do not let your speech cause you to sin. Let's look at that, the first part of that verse. And do not say in the presence of the messenger of God that it was a mistake. Your translation may say, do not say to the angel of God. That the same word can be translated there to be either angel or it can be translated as messenger. Now, Wilson asked the question there in the lesson book, how often do we play semantic word games with God? Now, semantics is not a word that we're going to use every day. If I use it again after this morning's class, it's unlikely that I ever will again. But it's used here, so let's talk about that. First, talk about what it actually is. Semantics is the study of meaning in language, not necessarily the study of language, but the study of meaning in language. It concerns how meaning is constructed and conveyed through signs, words, phrases, or sentences. And remember this third thing, that because it's important to our study here, it acknowledges that word choice matters, and so too does context. Now, consider these two phrases right here. That if you are sitting in a service of the church, if you're reading your scriptures and you read, my God, Jesus said that on the cross. My God, why have you forsaken me? Or, Lord, have mercy. That means one thing. After service, to walk out onto the parking lot and see somebody drive by really fast and you holler, my God, that means something else. Yeah, that means something else altogether. You catch a huge fish and you yell, Lord, have mercy. That means something else. That's a different context. And we're going to talk about these two phrases some more there because I think they're important, but I think that makes the point here of understanding how the same phrases in different contexts can take on different meanings and intentions. Now, this was a sentence, this was an example that Brother Adams used in his book. He said, that was a mere sexual indiscretion. It can't be anything but my guess why Wilson would have chosen this. Probably because it's so common. Probably because it gets more news and it's something we hear of. There may be more than some other things. But does anybody see a problem with that sentence, considering the semantics of it? Well, you have to. You have to. There. Consider the first problem. Indiscretion. That was a mere sexual indiscretion. What should that word be? Should be sin. There. We use the word indiscretion sometimes because that doesn't hit as hard as sin. Then it's like saying reproductive rights instead of abortion, or instead of saying let's kill the baby, because it doesn't hit as hard. There should be sin. The second problem, the word mere. Is there such a thing as a mere sexual sin? No. I see head shaking no, and I hear people saying no. Now, that word should be left out. Now, you picture this. Now, again, he's referring here to playing these word games with God. And you commit this sin, and you go before God, and you say, oh, I'm guilty, Lord, but it was a mere sexual indiscretion. No. It wasn't a mere anything. It was a sexual sin. So you stand up and you say what it was to the Lord. You don't have to say it to me, but I think you need to the Lord. Back up just a bit. You see the fingers crossed up here. Now, again, so sometimes it's not always words that semantics affect. Crossing your fingers in one context can mean you're wishing somebody good luck. I'm going to cross my fingers for you. I hope you win. I hope whatever. I've got my fingers crossed for you. Now, the other way is this. I know I promised, but what? I had my fingers crossed. I couldn't see who said that, but yes. Now that was the game we played when we were kids, there out on the schoolyard. You tell somebody or somebody say something to you, I'm going to do this. They don't do it, and they say, well, it didn't count because I had my fingers crossed. Well, okay, all right. It didn't count because you had your fingers crossed. Somebody said something about vows then in court or whatever. That might have been a discussion I had with Sharon before class started this morning. My mind is, well, it's what it is. But you see this man that with his hand in the air as he's taking an oath of some sort. Raise your right hand, repeat after me. Now, the other hand's not on the Bible. You can see where it's at. There, behind his back, with his fingers crossed. There. So whatever he is raising his right hand to affirm here, he's not, the intention might be, well, I don't have to do it because I had my fingers crossed. We have to consider this. Now, I don't think any of us come to the Lord with our fingers crossed on purpose. I really don't. I think more of people than that. I think when people come to the Lord, that at least for what I'm able to know, they do so sincerely. They do so with the best intentions. But it ends up being, I know I promised this, but the example Wilson uses in the book, I know I promised, but I'm only human. And that excuse has been so worn out, and it will continue to be. I've said it, I may say it again. We can't, Christians have to be better than that. And we need to understand that. Solomon reminds us to watch our words, to choose them carefully. Let's look at the rest of that verse. Why should God be angry on account of your voice and destroy the work of your hands? Let's look at those two phrases again. A man stands before you and words the most beautiful prayer that you've heard in a while. And after service, walks out front. Now, he's done a good work there, has he not? I mean, offering that prayer on your behalf to the Lord. But he walks outside, and for whatever reason, your child, your grandchild's walking by him, and he drops his Bible and just hollers, "My God." Has that not destroyed his prayer? Has that not said, why should God be angry on account of your voice and destroy the work of your hands? Then our words can destroy our actions. Then your words are going to reflect more of who you are than your actions. Then, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. As you think in your heart are the words there that will come there from your mouth. Comments, questions? Billy.
It all comes down to compromise. We know what we want to do is wrong, but we have to try to find a way to make it right. So we compromise and say it's a white lie, a little lie. Instead of
More semantics. A white lie as opposed to just a lie, yes. A lie is a lie. But if you couldn't hear Billy, and maybe most of you could, you speak up well, Billy, I appreciate it. He said, this comes down to compromise. We know what we should do, and yet we know what we want to do, and so we twist things around to justify what we want to do, and we go ahead and do it, and write it off as that mere indiscretion. There, you can take the word sexual out of that and fill in your own. There's sin in that blank. There. It's a good comment there, Billy. We've got to understand that God takes our speech, my speech, your speech, everybody's speech. He takes that speech and our promises, those vows, very seriously. Look. We need to address this. There, because I think it's a fair question there as we talk about keeping vows. What if I can't keep my vow? Well, that can be a problem. That's going to be a challenge there. But if you ask yourself that, then you've got to weigh that question against what the Lord has instructed us to do. Then if that vow was made rashly, and we can keep it, that even though keeping it is going to have a great cost for us, that we've still got to keep that vow. We've still got to keep that promise. Now that mistake that we make there, we might be able to use that as a reminder not to make that rash vow or another rash vow there in the future. And maybe there's a circumstance of some sort or another that's keeping you from keeping that vow. Remember Jonah in the whale or the belly of the whale. There, when he reminded the Lord already knew, he didn't need a reminder, that he had made a vow to him, and if I get out of this belly of the whale, I'm going to keep that vow. Now, whatever that vow was, Jonah's circumstance in the belly of the whale was keeping him from making it. Maybe you've got your own belly of the whale that's maybe slowing down. Maybe it's keeping you from keeping that vow. We might realize that the vow we made, we're just not able. We're just, that vow was so rash. We've made some sort of promise that we think in our own minds. Maybe it's part of that compromise, Billy. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's real. But understand this. God knows our hearts. He knows mine. He knows yours. He knows every heart in here. He also knows our motives. He knows the motive behind us not keeping that vow. Whether it's an inability to keep it, whether we've lost our desire to keep it. And just as God knows our hearts, just as He knows our motives, I know my own heart and I know my own motives. You know yours. Understand that can't conflict with what God knows. Sometimes we have to get a hold of ourselves and realize that we're making excuses, and we have to stop it. Remember our promise to God. Again, when you obeyed the gospel, you made that promise. Then maybe not in those words as you're making that promise to follow Him. And that's a consideration we all should have. If you come to yourself, you find yourself guilty here, then we need to repent. We need to ask God to forgive us our failings. This is important there because James chapter 1, there verse 9. You know this, my beloved brothers and sisters. Now everyone must be quick to hear, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Be slow with those promises. If it starts to roll off your tongue, be slow. Make sure that this isn't a rash vow of some sort. Matthew chapter 12, verses 36, 37, the words of Jesus. But I tell you that for every careless word that people speak, they will give an account of it on the day of judgment. For by your words you will be justified, and by your words you will be condemned. Your words can do both. Again, look at these two phrases one more time and understand the context there of justifying yourself. That wonderful acronym of OMG that I've seen brethren post on Facebook countless times. Maybe they didn't type it in, but they're sharing a post.
Or whatever. But as we get older, sometimes we talk too much and forget it.
I don't know who could hear Jane, but she said sometimes as we get older we talk too much. Well, yeah. Jane, and I'm still trying to learn this, Jane. I'm still trying to learn it. We think that saying what we think is a virtue. Well, sometimes it's more vice than virtue. There, and we've got to come to that understanding. Thank you, Jane.
We
And-
got to understand that everything we say is not just between us and the people we're saying before God.
God hears it. And if you believe these scriptures from Matthew, and I know you do, it appears to me the Lord's keeping a record here. He's keeping a transcript there of what we say. Now, again, so sometimes I think we focus more on words that will condemn us, but Jesus uses both here. Your words will also justify you. There's a balance there, and we've all got to find it. Is all of our speech going to be perfect all the time? I'm going to doubt it. I'm going to doubt it. Remember, again, the words of James, your tongue is probably not going to be tamed. Then, it's not going to be tamed. But at the same time, we know that we need to be working on that. Okay. Solomon concludes this section. Then, simple words here. Verse 7 just popped in up there. We've talked about it a little bit last week. Therefore, in many dreams and many words there is emptiness. Rather fear God. Yeah. That one sentence right there totals up these first 7 verses. It reflects our attitude of preparation before worship, our conduct during worship, the words that we use in worship, the way we conduct ourselves after worship, the things that we say after worship also. When we make vows to God and break them, what are we really saying about Him?
Not important.
Do what, Jane?
They're not important.
Not important. There, and that's pretty close, I think, to what I've put up. That's close enough. There, we don't fear, we don't reverence God there as we should. Now, again, I talked about this last week, and I think it's worth bringing up again. If during that same prayer that the man led earlier, as an example here, and you've got your cell phone, and that Facebook notification goes off, you just, whoa, hang on, Lord. I got to check this. Yeah, that is nothing but a lack of reverence. It's nothing except a lack of fear there for the Lord. And we've got to watch ourselves there in this, brethren. Okay, other comments, questions? Jim.
When I think of vows and improper speak, I have to look at Matthew chapter 5. And he begins in that chapter talking about the marriage vows and how that, they had come to disregard that. They wanted Moses to give them a writing of divorce, but he talks further about, the words that you say. If you're angry with your brother, say Raka, and you're in danger of the council, but whoever says thou fool shall be in danger of hellfire. And he goes on and he continues to talk there about the way that some of them would make their vows and things, he says, you swear by the temple, you shouldn't do that. It's not yours.
Not yours. Yeah.
Swear not by the earth, for that's God's footstool.
God's.
Heaven is God's throne. And he says, don't swear by your head. You can't turn one hair black and white. He said, it kind of goes along with what he was saying there, and he even references in verse 33 of chapter 5, he says, again, ye have heard that it hath been said by them of old time, thou shalt
No.
Hey, we're talking about influence here.
Mm-hmm.
And you can destroy influence very quickly if you don't, that's why I tell myself, I'm going to be resolute. I'm going to get the facts, and I'm going to make a decision. I'm going to be resolute, and I'll tell somebody. Even on simple things like this past week, guy got mad at me. I promised the lady in receiving that I would lock up the compactor when I had finished with it. He come over there and said, hey, don't lock that up. He said, I'm gonna have some stuff here in about 5 minutes and put in there, and she's not gonna be back from lunch. I said, I'm sorry. I know this seems simple, but I promised her I was gonna lock it back. And he said, okay.
Yeah. And I think you were right there, not being there from what you said. I got you back there. Matthew 5, 6, 7. There, Sermon on the Mount. And it's in that sermon that we get the model prayer. There that the Lord begins, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name. And that's a lot of what we're talking about here. Reverenced be your name. Then recognized in prayer. And that should be the basis for all of our prayer is our reverence, our homage to God there as the absolute supreme being. Consider also, you're going to see that this phrase by Solomon, fear God, I think 4 more times there in Ecclesiastes, or a total of 4. Back in chapter 3, verse 14, I know that everything God does will remain forever. There's nothing to add to it, and there's nothing to take from it. For God has so worked that men should fear Him. You go outside tonight, assuming the sky's clear, or even if it's not, and you look up and you see the creation there. God has so worked that men should fear Him. And we will get to this 8th chapter at some point, verse 12. Although a sinner does evil 100 times and may lengthen his life, still I know that it will be well for those who fear God, who fear Him openly. Those who reverence God, those who reverence Him openly, no matter who else is around, no matter what circumstances present themselves to you, there you are still going to reverence God. You're going to fear God in everything that you do. I'm going to look at a couple of sections of Old Testament, more Old Testament scripture, that as we wrap up there, these first 7 verses. And as we think about, again, our attitudes that in our service to God, the things that we say, the things that we don't say, whether we're worshiping from the heart, whether we're worshiping there from habit. Consider this section of Isaiah chapter 1, verses 10 there through 17. And, remember the context of when Isaiah, when these words were written. And Isaiah prophesied there through during the time of 4 different kings there in the southern kingdom of Judah. Then the last one being there Hezekiah. Then I think he began during the reign of Uzziah. There, I believe, during the last year of the reign of Uzziah. Then through Jopheth, there through Ahaz, and then there through the time of Hezekiah. Probably also at least familiar there with Manasseh, there, the son of Hezekiah, who would rule there after him. And Isaiah was a citizen of Jerusalem there in the southern kingdom there. And more than likely that this is addressed to Jerusalem, that the center of worship there for those Jews in the southern kingdom of Judah. There, and look at this. Look at who he compares them to. You rulers of Sodom, give ear to the instruction of our God. You people of Gomorrah, what are your multiplied sacrifices to me? Sodom and Gomorrah were long gone there at the time this was written there. But the people that Isaiah was addressing knew exactly who they were and the reference that he was making here. I have had enough of burnt offerings of rams and the fat of fed cattle, and I take no pleasure in the blood of bulls and lambs or goats. When you come to appear before me, who requires of you this trampling of my courts? Bring your worthless offerings no longer. Incense is an abomination to me. New moon and Sabbath, the calling of assemblies. I cannot endure iniquity and the solemn assembly. I hate your new moon festivals and your appointed feasts. They have become a burden for me. I am weary of bearing them, so when you spread out your hands in prayer, I hide my eyes from you. Even though you multiply prayers, I will not listen. Your hands are covered with blood. Wash yourselves, make yourselves clean, remove the evil of your deeds from my sight. Cease to do evil, learn to do good. Seek justice, reprove the ruthless, defend the orphan, plead for the widow. Not a king listened to Isaiah until the time of Hezekiah. The first three refused there to listen. Hezekiah did listen, and because he did, Jerusalem was spared there when the Babylonian captivity there occurred. Consider also there the 15th Psalm there, because I think that David here sums up in this psalm the righteous man, the attitude of the man whose worship is always going to be acceptable to God. Lord, who may dwell in your tabernacle? Who may dwell in your holy hill? Then those questions are answered. He who walks uprightly and works righteousness and speaks the truth in his heart, he who does not backbite with his tongue, nor does evil to his neighbor, nor does he take up reproach against his friend, but he honors, in whose eyes a vile person is despised, but he honors those who fear the Lord. He who swears to his own hurt and does not change. He who does not put out his money at usury, nor does he take a bribe against the innocent, he who does these things shall never be moved. And pay particular attention here to, if I can focus in on this verse, well, and I may not. I should have never took my eyes away from it. Damage to you, you keep that word, that you worship God, as we would say today, in spirit and in truth. You walk uprightly before God. You make a promise to the Lord, then you had better keep it. Yeah. All right, well, that wraps up this first section about worship and words. There. Comments, questions anywhere? We've only got a couple of 3 minutes left before. Okay. He continues on, moves to the third section of the lesson, the third and last section, that in that the preacher saw ugly oppression. Now he goes here from instruction back to his observations. Look down at the bottom of the screen. If you see oppression of the poor and denial of justice and righteousness in the province, do not be shocked at the sight. Then the preacher here observed how people with money often intimidated those that are without. Now, again, oppression of the poor, denial of justice and righteousness, that is those same poor people that the oppression is talking about here. He said we shouldn't be shocked with government corruption and red tape, and I really doubt that too many of us are. And that, for one official watches over another official, and their higher officials over them. It's this. Government, and Solomon is at the top of the rung here. We understand that. There, Solomon didn't answer to anybody. But it can be an endless succession of people, one watching over another, one fixing the mistakes of another, one ignoring the mistakes of another. But this is the idea here. Don't be shocked at this, there, because it's nothing but one official watching there over another. And he goes on, the poor are thus left with a sigh. You can't fight. You can't fight what? There we go. You can't, I don't know who come up with that saying there, but it's within this context right here. Then, if you see oppression of the poor and denial of justice and righteousness in the province, do not be shocked at the sight. Now, you're not going to fight City Hall. And I've got, the next part of this is going to take up more time than I've got. So we'll introduce the verse and then we'll talk about it then next week. Verse 9 there provides the balance to the corruption. And look at verse 9 here. After all, a king who cultivates the field is beneficial to the land. And again, I've got a little bit to say about that, and there's no time this morning. So, in the time between today and, Lord willing, our next class, study that. There, look at it, give it some thought there, and see what you come up with. I'm going to go ahead and just stop the class at this point because I know we can't have more than a minute or so. So again, I appreciate your comments. I appreciate the questions. And we will pick up there with verse 9 next week, Lord willing.